What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Long Haul Mentality Podcast. And today I got my homie Hunter on. What's up, dude?
What's going on, brother?
Got the nice little lean body background today.
Oh yeah, getting all ready for our Pro Series meetup this weekend.
Yeah, dude,
So
I'm excited for it, especially getting to
it's
try
going to
some
be
of
a
the new
good
stuff.
time. It's going to be a good time.
You said we're getting a pre-workout and a pump?
Yeah, so we're going to have R&D samples for everyone to try, but we're going to have a true pre-workout powder, so with stimulants and everything, and then we're going to have a liquid-based pump for everyone to try too. So
Sweet.
a
That's
couple
awesome.
new exciting things. Got some cool gear for everyone. It should be a good weekend.
At this point, I'm just like collecting cool Labrada Pro
Yeah.
Series like
Just
clothes.
one of ones. You can't have this. You got to be special.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so we kind of already discussed a little bit, and we've known each other for a number of years now. And when I first met you, you were really hard focused on the like all out brutalize myself with training. If I don't walk away with another pound or another rep, like it's an absolute failure of a day. Um, to now it being much more of a intentional, you've pulled back a little bit, putting a lot of extra effort into the execution and that kind of thing. So I want to discuss that mindset a little bit and what it took for you to realize that going that hard wasn't necessarily going to continue to carry you forward, right? So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was really important for you to train that way in the beginning. And I think it really helped you put on the kind of mass that you needed. But what was it that made you realize that you needed to shift away from that style?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head with that last statement, and that is, I needed to do that for a while. I'm a really big proponent of talking about bodybuilding like it is a journey, because it truly is a journey, especially, for those of us out there that are trying to take it, to the professional level or, even to the Olympia level these days. I feel like you have to make a distinguishing between that because getting to the pro level is very different than competing at the Olympia level. So, to get to that kind of level, I do believe that there is, long periods of time where, true logged book progressive overload is going to be your best bet. When do I think that is going to be your best bet? I think it's your best bet in the early to mid part of your journey, if you will. Whenever you are consistently growing, you are consistently making gains, you aren't that beat up, everything feels good. When you're in that setting and the only goal is I need to get a lot bigger, and that's what, the first, I went pro in 2018, I would say until 2 years ago, that was the goal. It's because open bodybuilding, as pretty as you are, as conditioned as you can be, if you aren't 240, 245 plus on stage, you aren't going to do well, especially at my height. So early on in my career as an amateur and then the first couple of years as a pro, it very much so was I need to grow at all costs. I had food coming out of my ears during the off season. Every time I walked in the gym, I tried to do, either another rep with the same weight or put, 5 or 10 pounds on and hit the same reps as I did last week. And I truly, to this day, I'll tell anyone that asks, I truly do think that's the best way to train. That being said, I did it for so long and did get so big and so strong doing it that there started to be like a little bit of diminishing returns with it in a couple different avenues. The first one was, I started not getting hurt regularly, but the propensity for injury goes way up, especially like on leg movements whenever it's not okay, well, like let's work in some different rep ranges or let's do some rest pause or let's do, some pre-exhaust today before we go into it. No, it was the same exact leg workout for 4 to 6 months at a time. And every single time I walked in there, I tried to put more weight on it or do another rep with the same weight as last week. Like I said, works great for a long time, but eventually you start running yourself into a wall and you get strong enough to where, okay, maybe leg pressing 14 plates aside for a set of 10 isn't, as safe as, 10 plates aside for, 15 reps with a slow negative. And, that's like kind of where my thinking started to shift a little bit was whenever, I was starting to get hurt. I was starting to feel beat up. But, most importantly, and this is what I tell everyone with like any facet of bodybuilding, it started to truly not be fun and be a major source of anxiety for me.
That
It
was
got to the point where, 2 days before a leg session, I'm genuinely anxious about thinking about the top set that I have to do on the hack squat, or, genuinely anxious about the fact that I need to put another, 10 pounds on the incline press that made my eyeballs feel like they were going to bug out of my head last week, So it got to the point where that logbook and truly just nose to the grindstone progressive overload became more of a hindrance than a help, I believe.
Yeah, it's funny because I had that exact thought in my mind. Is like there was many times that I would come down to Houston and like you would be training legs sometime in the weekend that I would come visit, and like when I first got there, you would just be a ball of anxiety, and you could tell that something wasn't right. And before like I really got to know you and stuff, I'd be like, is he pissed off about something? Did I do something? Like it would be one of those things like what's wrong? And then we'd go to the gym. You do your leg press or your hack squat or whatever it was, and there was an immediate shift after, like, oh,
Yeah,
Hunter's like normal again.
it literally got to the point where it was funny because it's like a switch got flipped off after I did my top set of hacks or leg press.
Yep. It would be
The second I got that out of the way, it was like, whew, okay, my knees didn't explode, I didn't tear a quad, let's have some fun for the rest of the day.
yeah,
It was
right.
one of those
It
things.
was such a drastic shift from like Hunter being just like something's wrong to like, oh, everything's cool. He just was stressed out about having to squat 9 plates, and I also think that since you have kind of made that shift, I personally watching you from a distance, I've seen the most change in your physique, especially in your back, which is something that I think um, people really like would dog you about a lot of like, oh, Hunter doesn't have a back. And it's like, well, he does have a back. It's just that he needs a little bit more detail to it. So like, would you say that a lot of it was just starting to realize that like you had enough tissue, it was time to start focusing on the detail of things now?
I don't know if it was so much as I realized I had enough tissue as much as I realized what I had been doing for, 5 or 6 years straight wasn't working that well.
Sure.
Had been doing the bent over rows. I had been deadlifting every workout. I had been doing heavy dumbbell rows. All of the old adage traditional wisdom for, growing your back. And my back was absolute shit. It was, when we got into the gym here at Labrada and I handpicked some back pieces and, more so than anything, truly checked my ego with everything and truly, started taking things through a full range of motion. Very much so became cognizant of, okay, I'm not trying to move the weight from point A to point B, even with good form. I'm trying to move this weight from point A to point B with this specific muscle,
Right.
and truly checking any ego with what weight's on the bar. And it made the biggest difference in my back. I don't like to say many nice things about myself, but my back shots have become a strong point in the last 2 years. And,
Completely.
just like you said, at the beginning of my career, my back was not good at all.
Right. Well, it's funny when we say not good because it's like you would destroy most people's backs, but when you look at the level of bodybuilding you're at, it's like you have to look at it as, oh, it's not good enough, right?
Yeah,
And I think a lot of times, especially from like analyzing people's movement patterns for so long, the place that I see that really be the biggest hindrance for people is lat development, right? Like all those heavy rows and whatever back exercise you want to put in there, like when you're really slinging some stuff and moving some weight around and like you said, moving things from point A to point B, oftentimes you end up just using your traps or your lower back or your erectors and that kind of stuff. And you're not building the meat of those lats. So like pulling it back a little bit and going, all right, well, I don't need to use 5 plates on the Nautilus pull down. I can use 3.5 and feel this thing a lot better. I can now start to build that lat a little bit better. And like, again, there's the whole argument of feeling something doesn't necessarily matter, but my only kickback to that is it's something what you and I've discussed just in random talks is like, I think there is something to be said about like, yeah, sure. Maybe in the grand scheme of muscle building, you don't have to feel it. But when we're coming to a physique sport where you now have to flex on stage and show that muscle on stage, being able to feel the exercise while you're doing it probably has some type of carryover to being able to show that tissue better. Would you agree?
absolutely. People talk about mind muscle connection, a lot. And I do believe in mind muscle connection, like you said, like moving weights from point A to point B is very different than doing it with the target muscle. Like use that Nautilus pull down, for example. It's like I can get in there and I can, pull my arm to my hip pocket, or I can, think about keeping my upper arm externally rotated and keeping the elbow closed and all these other little things, in my head that, yes, I'm not able to lift as much weight, but I feel like someone's shoving an ice pick in my lower lap the whole time.
Yeah, 100%.
So I do believe, and I think something that a lot of people do too is they'll have their form really dialed and they'll have good intentions for like their feeder sets or touch sets, whatever the hell you want to call them, but they still have yet to like fully check the ego for their top sets, and they'll throw weight on there that they can't handle with that same form that they were doing their warm up sets with, even though they're trying to. And I feel like that can make all the difference too, because like you've been around me enough to know, like probably like 2 years ago, I truly just, it was more so from how much my shoulders and stuff were hurting. But I was like, okay, we're going back to square one. I'm taking everything through full. Some people would call it even extreme ranges of motion, especially at my size. But it
For
made the
sure.
biggest difference going from my joint health and how things felt, and then also from a development standpoint. I do strongly believe that there is a lot to be said for really overletting those lengthened ranges. I do believe there is a ton to be said for spending time in both at both ends of the extreme range. Like getting a great stretch and a great contraction. Both things you can't do if you have too much weight on the machine that you're using. So
Right. And the whole mind muscle thing, like I completely agree. Like if the only thing that you're doing is going into the gym trying to squeeze and feel something, you're probably going to leave something on the table. You're probably not going to use as much weight as you could or need to in order to build the amount of density that you have. But there is something to be said of being able to feel that target tissue while also using the weight that you're actually needing to use to make that progress. And another thing that you touched on there, which has been something that I've been hard focused on with a lot of people, and I know I've talked to you about a number of times, is like using those end ranges of motion, getting to that fully stretched position, allowing things to open and close the way they need to, is going to carry over to your mobility to where you can move better. And then better mobility leads to better posing on stage. Because
exactly,
with posing, we have to put ourselves into positions that, being that large, isn't necessarily easy to do, especially when you're as strong as you are. Like if you're trying to do a back double and you can only like rotate your fist back this far, like you're going to not show that pose as well as you could. Or if you can't open your shoulder blades as much as you could, you're not going to have good front lat spreads or rear lat spreads or whatever it is. So not only can you build more tissue by getting to those lengthened ranges of motion and really allowing things to open, you can also improve your stage presence, which is exactly what the training should do. It should improve not only the muscle look and the size, but it should also improve your ability to be able to get there, right? Like you're not going to be what are those, a contortionist by any means, not at your size, but we can make sure that you're not just this ball of angry tissue all the time,
exactly, exactly.
And
And
go
I
ahead.
think this past year has been the best lesson in that, because this is the biggest I have ever been in my life, but it's also the best my shoulders and elbows have ever felt, and my hips
Yep.
during my professional career. And, I completely attribute that to, like I said, like 2-ish years ago, really going back to the drawing board and really dialing in everything and getting to those end ranges on every exercise that I do. I feel like, at the end of the day, I feel like, training properly is the best rehab for joints and for
For sure.
mobility issues.
The next place I was going with that is like when we first started getting to know each other, and like you were really going through these really aggressive heavy sets. Like it was like every week or every other week you were getting tissue work once, twice a week, whatever. But if I'm not mistaken, you've kind of reduced that quite a bit, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, 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 for sure. Like in a prep setting or like all last year, I was still probably like a twice a week kind of deal. But ever since the Olympia, which was 3.5 months ago now, I think I've
Mm.
gotten like 3 or 4 sessions of body work total. Yeah, time flies, dude, right?
Uh, it's crazy, man. It's
Yeah, time
wild to think that
flies.
October was that long ago,
Time flies. But
but yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
so it's been like definitely the least amount of tissue work I've ever done in my life, and everything's holding in, really well actually, especially considering the fact that I'm like completely half natty right now.
yeah, and like it's a hard thing to like convince people that, hey, look, you don't have to do all these extra modalities for recovery. You just need to train a little bit better. But I think you're a case in point here of like that working well, because like you change your training, you changed your ranges of motion, you changed how much weight you were using, and now your body's the best it's ever felt. Like there would be some type of ping that would come up like every time I'd see you, like, oh, this is a little pissed off or this is a little irritated. And it would be something that would kind of like, it'd get a little bit better and then it'd come back. It'd get a little bit better than it'd come back. But now it seems like you've kind of not fully figured that out. We're always going to have pings when you're as strong as you are and as big as you are. But I think it seems like it's definitely helped you move forward pretty well there.
Yeah, no, it definitely, like I said, it's the biggest I've ever been, but it's also probably close to the best I've ever felt, which
That's great.
definitely says something.
And that's a good spot for you to be in. Now, the interesting part about that with that mindset is like the old adage that people have kind of talked about is like, you know, Branch was a crazy hard trainer, Ronnie was a crazy hard trainer, like all these guys who were just known for all out intensity in the gym. There came a point in their career, like Dorian case and point, got to a point where like he was still doing that crazy high intensity training, just started tearing things left and right, and like was banging his body up to a point where now he doesn't really lift at all. So people will have that conversation of, well, if only they had just changed their training X number of years into their career, would they have been in a better spot? But then on the other side of that, if you take that dog out of the fight, are they still going to be the same bodybuilder? Right. So how has that mental shift been for you of like going from, all right, well, this is what got me to the show. So this is what got me the size. Like I got to keep doing this in order to continue to make progress, to now realizing you don't have to do that in order to keep progressing. Well, what has that shift been like?
Yeah, so I think honestly, man, the catalyst for the change was honestly just how poor my body started feeling. You know, it wasn't one of those things that I was always injured, but it was one of those things that I just constantly felt like I like got hit by a car when I get out of bed in the morning. And you know, being in I'm gonna call it pain, like, you know, not just uncomfortable or sore, but being in pain basically every single day for, you know, long periods of time, it affects your mental health in a negative way. And you know, especially after these last 3 months, because you know, I really just made a decision these last 3 months to truly, you know, back off, let my body heal. I haven't given myself a break longer than 8 weeks since, you know, I went pro in 2018, so 7 years ago now. So it's been very eye-opening to see my body's response to, you know, lowering the training stimulus, lowering the intensity a little bit, even lowering the food a little bit. But, you know, as a result of all those things, the stress level is so much lower. And, you know, it shows in my body. I feel healthy. I look healthy. I'm not hurting all day long. I'm close to the strongest and biggest I've ever been, you know, eating significantly less food and taking significantly less drugs than normal. So, you know, the proof's in the pudding. You know, obviously, you know, this isn't something like groundbreaking. It's something that, you know, like my peers and people around me have been telling me for months or even years. You know, it's like, hey, you know, you back off a little bit, you might actually get a little bit more out of it because you won't be so stressed out all the time. But, you know, very much so, like you said, you know, you get stuck in this. This is what got me here. This is what I keep on doing. And so, you know, in addition to just, you know, getting to the point where I felt like I was in pain like all the time, you know, I got to the point also where, you know, it's like, okay, I've been doing things this way for this long and it's given me a good result, you know, a great result in some areas, you know, like legs or, you know, shoulders or arms. But in other areas, you know, like chest and back, you know, it wasn't what I wanted. I felt like those areas weren't growing at the same rate as others. And obviously, nothing will always grow, you know, consistently across the board. But, you know, I truly felt that that was lagging compared to the rest of it. So, you know, taking the step back, you know, realizing that, okay, I don't need to bang myself up like this all the time, you know, having 80% of the weight on the bar, but, you know, getting 20% more proprioception and, you know, just engagement out of it, it's actually going to be better for me in the long run. And then also, you know, another one that people always, you know, fail to realize, like for the most part, especially, you know, if you're newer to the sport, is they always think of things in a vacuum. You know, they think of a training split as, okay, well, this is the split for 1 week. Or they think of a diet as, okay, you know, this is what I'm going to do for, you know, the next 3 weeks, not thinking about the fact that they need runway for the next 6 months, you know, before they are able to start coming down or before they need to start going up. So, you know, thinking about, you know, from that standpoint, you know, if you're having, a 5% less taxing workout every time you train, but you're able to train more frequently perhaps, or you're able to train more pain-free perhaps, or you're just simply in a better mind state because you're not in fucking pain all day long. I feel like that's going to make a huge difference for you in a positive way.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when people argue that, like, oh, Ronnie couldn't have been as good as he was if he had changed his training, they start to forget that, like, hey, you can still train really hard by just pulling back a little bit. It doesn't have to be this crazy thing. Like, I think anyone that went to the gym with you right now, not knowing the ins and outs of the changes that you've made in that mindset around training, wouldn't really notice a difference, right? They wouldn't look at you and go, well, he's not training as hard as he used to. Like, you're still killing yourself in the gym.
Yeah.
You're just getting a little bit more out of less, which is kind of what we preach with everything. Like, can we get more out of less drugs? Can we get more out of less food? Can we get more out of training, like less training? Like, get the maximal results out of as little as possible. So
Minimum effective dose with all things.
yeah. So, like, just because you shifted training doesn't mean that you took away intensity. It doesn't mean that you're training like a girl with pink dumbbells anymore, right? Like, I think that's where people get really confused with it, of like, they believe it has to be one or the other, when it's like, no, no, no. Like, you can still train really hard at like 80% of those all out max sets that you were doing before, right? And you can still get a lot out of that. And like you said, enjoyment, right? Like, you get to go to the gym now and have some fun and really enjoy training, because, like, if you didn't enjoy training, you wouldn't be a professional bodybuilder making a living getting on stage, right? Like,
Exactly.
it
Exactly.
so if you're absolutely hating every time you step in the gym because you know what you have to do and you know how it's going to make you feel after, that's going to shorten your runway of success long
Yeah.
term, because even though you are at your best fourth in the world, doesn't mean that, like, it's now a sprint. It is still the same process. It is still like, I have to keep banging my head against the same wall until something moves. It's like, we still got to try and make this thing last a long time.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Now, you kind of brought it up without me saying anything, but the other aspect of this that I've been a little bit more focused on recently is how that can shift with food as well, right? Because, like you said in the beginning, like, you had food coming out of your ears and you were eating everything you possibly could, and up to a certain point, like, I think that is necessary in order to get to a point where you're 300 pounds, right? Like, you're not going to get there just barely eating in a surplus. But would you say that your mindset has also shifted now, where it's like, all right, well, let's put ourselves in like a minor calorie surplus and then just train fucking hard and let the body do what it wants to do?
Yes. Exactly. And it's I feel like, and this is where I'm at in my journey right now. So I put the 12, 15 years that it took to getting this level of tissue and sustaining this level of tissue. At this point, I haven't been under 250 pounds in 5 years now. Like, maybe fully dressed out on stage the first couple of years, I was like 242, 243, like the day of the show. But I've been over 250 pounds, on stage even for the last 4 or 5 years, and then, hanging out closer to, 285 to 295 in the off season. So, the first time that I hit that weight, it was one of those, oh my God, this is so miserable. I am eating so much. I can't bend over to tie my shoes. My lower back hurts and I'm kind of fat. And as time goes on, like every off season that came around, it was easier to hit the scale number, but I was doing it at a much better composition with less food. And every off season that rolls around has been, more and more and more of that. I think it's, getting a better understanding with my nutrition and knowing that I don't have to be in such a surplus. Um, and then B, I feel like it's just one of those things that it takes time to establish tissue.
100%.
It takes time to get tissue to truly stick. You ask anyone who, finishes up with bodybuilding, and it's kind of like a running joke with them. It's like, yeah, I thought I was going to lose like 50 pounds in 3 months, but they lost 10 or 12, and they're almost as strong as they were when they were running and gunning. Just because of the fact that their stress level is so low, and the fact that they still do have so much tissue on them. So once you get to that point, and it does come, at a point in anyone's career, I feel like, especially at the professional level, it's not all about size at all costs.
Yep.
And,
Yeah, 100%.
especially it's not about size at all costs at the expense of other things, like i.e. your waistline, your health, your flow, your look. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, completely. And if we the goal of bodybuilding is to just improve the physique year over year, and at some point you're going to start to get diminishing returns when it comes to just forcing food. And I think a lot of times when we start to see people get to a spot where like they went from having a really good streamlined physique where their waist was as small as it could be and everything else looked really good off of that, they keep pushing food in the off season and that waist continues to grow, and then it continues to make the physique look worse, right? So like you start to get those diminishing returns in the training and in the nutrition. So now it's like, for lack of better terms, it's more like you're in a refinement period where it's like we're not looking to add. You don't need to be 330 pounds, right? Like that's not how this is going to work. But you can, like, even if you came back at the same weight that you competed at this last year, it can still look better than the year previous because you're at a better composition with a little bit more detail and stuff. So it goes from this thing of like, oh, every year I'm trying to put on 5 to 10 pounds of stage weight to like, maybe I put on 2, maybe I put on 1, maybe I just put on just a little bit
Or,
here.
maybe you lost 4 or 5, but your waist is 2 inches smaller on
Yep.
stage and you look bigger for it.
Yep.
You
And
know,
and I would say that you're that come to mind, you're one of the few guys that is currently competing that has gone from people like really blasting you about your core to you pulling a vacuum on stage, right? To like completely drastically changing that midsection. And I think one, overall reduction of stress, and 2, not having to be so aggressive with food and being a little bit more mindful of like, all right, we're going to take this off season a little bit slower and just let the tissue kind of marinate and build over time with a minor surplus instead of you walk around uncomfortable all the time, was a big factor in that, on top of a lot of other things you did. Would you say that's the case?
I definitely agree with that. And then, hopping into a whole different subject, but one that I feel like needs mentioned within the realm of what we're talking about. For the first time 2 years ago, I placed a massive emphasis on my digestive health. And, I really do feel like we've been talking about what makes the biggest difference this whole podcast. I really do feel like that is at the top of the list, if not like
100%.
number 2 or something. But, addressing my digestive health because, fact of the matter is, you're a bodybuilder, especially an open pro. You've been abusing your digestive system for a decade. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You've been eating an excessive amount of food for 10 years to make it to an open pro stage to do well. So, at first, especially like in your 20s, everyone makes a joke about, oh, yeah, the Taco Bell messes with me worse than it did in my 20s. Well, yeah, the chicken and rice messes with you worse than you in your 20s, too.
100%.
So taking the time, I had a GI map done, I had a gut stool analysis done, figured out what was going on, spent 3 or 4 months fixing it. And then after I fixed it, placed a lot of emphasis on keeping it fixed and keeping my gut healthy. And, I think, we were talking about how it's taking a lot less. I think that's one of the biggest culprits in that is, my digestive system is so much healthier. So I do want to make sure that we shed some light on that. I know you're a big proponent of digestive health as well.
Big time. It's literally the last video I did on my YouTube was just me talking about digestive health. And I think one of the first times I heard somebody really talk about it and bring it to light in this way was Ben Pekulski. Like, it doesn't matter how much food you can put in your face. If your body's just getting rid of it and pushing it out and not assimilating that food, is it really doing anything for you? Are you just
Yeah.
eating stuff for the sake of making more poop? It's like you're
I
not
was
making.
literally just about to say
Yeah.
to anyone watching this out here, it is not normal to be pissing out of your ass 4 to 6 times a day,
Yeah.
even if you're in the off season eating a lot of food. Let me tell
Yeah.
you, that is not normal.
100%. That's a bad sign. You should probably fix that. It's
Yeah.
like,
But
so
dude, you'd be so fucking blown away by how many people will literally describe something like that to me. It's like, yeah, man, I was pushing food pretty hard this off season, got a little rough, was using the bathroom like 4 or 5 times a day, was super gassy. I was like, so you're making yourself miserable and not absorbing anything. Got
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're walking around with an inflamed gut, of course you're going to have like distension, and then your body's not going to be able to assimilate things as well. You're not going to be able to train as hard. You're probably going to feel like shit. You're going to be lethargic. Like your gear's probably not going to work as good. You probably get more sick. Like there's a lot of things that are attached to like your stomach, right? And like if that is in a bad spot, all of these other dominoes are not going to fall the way they need to in order for us to get where we need, you know? So
Exactly.
like between not all of that comes back to stress, right? Because like pushing food like that is a stress. Try and eat Hunter's peak calories that he ever ate just for a week. Do it for a week and tell me how you feel. Like that is a stress on the system.
For those
You're
of there that out there that want to do it, peak food was 200 grams of lean meat and then 400 grams of rice and
ugh,
then 20 grams of ghee butter for 6 meals a day, plus
dude.
a shake post training.
Tuttle and I talked about it the other week when I saw him at that seminar, and like the most amount of rice I ever ate per meal was 365 grams, and like that's not a lot in the grand scheme. Like it is when you look at it, it's a lot, but like I've talked to people who are eating 500, 600. Like Martin eats just a stupid amount of rice per meal because that guy's metabolism is crazy. So like in the grand scheme of other people I know, it's not a ton of food, but for me, it was like I was trying to eat an elephant a day. And like that's going to cause stress. And then we go back to your old style of training, like you're causing stress 2-3 days prior to you even trying to hit a leg session.
Yeah.
All of that stuff is going to combine together to make this perfect storm of things that are going to slow down your progress. Like you might think you're doing the right things because you're kicking your ass in the gym and you're eating all this food and you're taking all the gear and whatnot, but you're actually just like spinning your wheels or even going
Yeah,
backwards, you
spinning
know?
your wheels because you're miserable. You're sitting there and you're nervous about training 2 or 3 days before it. You're getting legitimately pissed off 5 or 6 times a day because you have to eat when you're not hungry and try not to throw up.
Ugh.
Everything's hurt. You're inflamed. Like it's just, it's not a recipe for success or longevity, like at a health level or a mental level.
Right. And now I just to make this point very clear, neither myself or Hunter are saying that you shouldn't be uncomfortable, especially in the early days of your bodybuilding career. If you're trying to get to like a level that Hunter is at, you're going to have to be really uncomfortable. You're going to have to go through those times where you're like, I don't want to think about food. I don't want to look at food. You're going to have to go through times where you're anxious about training because you're trying to push yourself to another level. You're going to have to do those things. But we're talking about a shift of a mindset of a champion bodybuilder here who's going from like, oh, I'm trying to win a pro show to like, I'm trying to win the Olympia or climb the ranks of the Olympia. You have to look at things a little bit different and make the whole system work together. Right. And like, you should be trying to make the whole system work together regardless of what you do. But, you have to shift at some point. We have to make that adjustment away in order to, like I said, to continue to make that progress forward, because nothing will stop a bodybuilding career more than stress, because it's
Yeah.
going to wreck everything.
Yeah. And like, I know this is going to sound like such a surprise to most people out there listening, or maybe a lot of them. This is supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be fun.
Yep.
Especially for anyone out there that's not doing it for like a living. Like, yeah, like sometimes it's a job for me, I'll admit it. But for those of you out there who have a normal job and a family and everything like that, bodybuilding is your hobby. Hobbies are supposed to be fun. Keep that in mind.
Yep. And like early, like even looking at my bodybuilding career, like when I first got like a really big off season push and like was pushing a ton of food and really got with my first coach that was really pushing me that way, like that was fun. It was exciting because it's like, oh, I'm doing all this stuff. But at some point when you do it year over year over year, it's like, oh, fuck, do I have to do this again? And at that point, when you get to that spot, you should probably start going, all right, something probably needs to change here, because if I start hating everything I'm doing, I'm not going to be able to continue to do this for the number of years I need to in order to get to the goal that I'm looking to get to, you know?
Exactly. And like just throwing random ass numbers out there, but it's like, okay, call the absolute like miserable off season like 100 at 100%. Does operating at 90%, but in a absolute great headspace and feeling good, that's going to be way more sustainable than the other one and give you way more results in the same time period, in my opinion. But even if you're not taking the same time periods, it's going to be more sustainable doing the one that's like actually kind of enjoyable. And piggybacking on what you said, like it's a hard sport. It's not always going to be fun. It's not always going to be enjoyable. But that being said, it should not just be a source of misery 24/7.
Yep, completely. And especially for someone like yourself who has a family, you've got a wife and kid, and if you're miserable all the time because you have to eat so much and train so hard and all those things, that's going to carry over to the rest of your life. And sure, like people will talk about like, oh, you got to be a hermit, you got to do this, that, and the other as a bodybuilder. Like, yeah, sure, that you can live that way, but at some point you're not going to bodybuild anymore. And if you have completely ruined all those relationships with people because you were a miserable fuckhead for so many years, like you're going to be left alone by the end of this thing going, well, what the fuck do I do now? You know, like you have
Just
to
just
still.
just you and your plastic trophies.
Yep, exactly. And like I've got two of them over here and I don't know where the rest of them are. Like they don't matter to me, you know, like and even if it was like an Olympia thing back there, at some point I would much rather have the people in my life around me than a trophy that
Take
I
it from
can't.
someone with all the Olympia medals. The experiences with the people that I had at the Olympias are the way more memorable part than the medals.
100%. And
Yeah.
I think being able to sustain like a life that is, we can't say balanced because like there's nothing balanced about becoming a world-class bodybuilder, but being able to step out of like Hunter the bodybuilder into Hunter the family man, or Hunter the friend, or whatever you want to, whatever title you want to put on that, allows you to be able to go back to those other things and enjoy it. Because like if you're just stuck in this thing all the time, you're going to eventually hate it, and you're going to be that guy that burns out, that everybody's like, oh, he had such good potential, what happened to him? It's like, well, he fucking killed himself trying, not literally, he killed himself trying to do this thing because he never gave himself time to relax and be a human,
Yeah.
you know. And I think people want to believe that.
People choose to do it in an unsustainable way,
Yep.
not realizing that it's unsustainable at the time.
Yep. And people just decide that they have to be miserable in order to make this thing last. And again, like you said, sustainability. Like if you're miserable all the time, that's not sustainable. And then you're just going to be depressed and alone and not know what to do here. So the I think the biggest takeaway for a lot of people here is like, one, like know when it's time to change. Like, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And two, give yourself some grace, like relax a little bit. Try to find the sustainable path that's going to allow you to be able to do this for X number of years, right? Because what you turned pro what year?
2018,
And then your first Olympia was when?
2019,
Okay, well,
or 2020. Yeah, 2019 was off. Coming
you're
back from shoulder surgery.
you're a special specimen there, you know. And like not most people don't go from turning pro to immediately to the Olympia in 2 years, but like even 2 years is a long time frame, you know. And people want to be like, oh, I got last in my first show ever, like I'm going to go and win an overall the next year. It's like, well, if you have the genetics, maybe, but you also, it might also take you a decade to get that first overall. Like it, 13 years, I never won a show. I never even won my class. So it's like you have to understand that like it's not something that you can force to happen. You have to allow the body to, you can't force a result. You have to let the result do, you have to let the body get the result over the time period that it takes you to get there, you know?
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, regardless of what level you're doing it at, it has to be for yourself.
Yep.
Something that I've always known, but it's truly dawned on me, throughout me operating in our industry, seeing, anything from my peers on the Olympia stage down to, people, amateurs I'll talk to at guest posings, and that is, no one gives a shit if you bodybuild or underwater basket weave or, want to be a world champion tandem bicycle rider with your best friend. The people that matter in your life just want to see you happy,
Yep.
you know?
100%.
So keep that in mind. No one's expecting you to bodybuild. Bodybuilding at any level, including my level, is something that, A, is a privilege to do, and then B, should be something that you want to do.
Yep.
Like I said, no one's forcing you to do it. And I feel like, and this is one thing that I feel like, as social media, as great as it is for some things and as bad as it is for others, I feel like one of the worst things within our industry specifically that social media has done is it's almost romanticized being miserable.
Mm-hmm.
It's romanticized not having a social life. It's romanticized, yeah, you need to feel all beat up all the time. Like, yeah, no one's going to understand your goals. Fuck them. You don't need them. Like,
Yep.
no, this isn't supposed to be some dark, like masochistic thing. Like it's supposed to be your hobby, your release, your fun.
Right.
And obviously, you're 2, 3, 4 weeks out from a show. That shit's not going to be fun. But if you're spending all year long going, man, I'm fucking sick of eating. Man, my body hurts from training. Man, I'm hungry from dieting. Oh, I don't want to do this cardio. It's like maybe go back to the drawing board and ask
Why
yourself, am I having fun with this, or am I feel like I'm forced to do it,
exactly?
and why do I feel like I'm forced to do it?
Why would you do something you hate? Like it doesn't make any sense, like that. I hate being in pain, so I'm not going to go stab myself every day. Like that's just not going to be a thing, right? And the other side to the social media thing is like, yeah, the grind mentality. Like, sure, we got to grind in order to get to a certain point. Like, you got to put a lot of effort into things, but I also think that's hurt a lot of people. Then on the other side of it, I think bodybuilding, or like trying to get as big as you possibly can be, has also become a thing that's just cool to do online. Because like, if you are a young kid who's getting into this thing, and like you're watching people online and whatnot, and like there's a lot of physiques out there, there's a lot of people posting how good they look and whatnot, you start to believe like, oh, I got to do that to be somebody and be important. It's like, that's not the case. Like, if you want to do this and you want to show your physique off and you want it to improve, then cool, show it off, do it, and enjoy it. But don't do it just because you feel like everyone else is. Like, you need to actually love this thing in order to do it, whether you get on stage or not. Like, if you like it, I put bodybuilding aside, like getting on stage in the last year, and I'm just now getting back to a spot where I love it, because I got to a point where I was fucking killing myself, and I hated everything I was doing, and I was miserable, and like it just wasn't fun anymore, and like I needed 8, 9 months to just say fuck it, I'm just going to be a guy again, I'm just going to be normal. So it's like, don't just do it because you feel like it's the only thing you can do. And the other aspect there is like, your whole identity doesn't have to be the bodybuilder, right? It's like, I, I, I think that's one of the biggest things that people have a hard time with, is like, if I decide to stop being a bodybuilder, no one's going to like me anymore. It's like, you're lying to yourself. Like, that's absolutely ridiculous. There's much more to you. And if you're the guy walking into the room and the only thing you can talk about is bodybuilding, like the whole conversation, somebody's going to be like, is this kind of going to shut the fuck up or talk about anything else? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, the prime example is like, when you and I talk, like, yeah, we might be like, oh, how's training, how's this, how's that, but like most of our conversations have nothing to do with lifting at all. It's like,
Yep.
we have other aspects to ourselves that are very important. Um, so what advice would you give to anyone who's kind of in that spot right now, where they're like, they've been doing things a certain way and they're really struggling with things? Like, where would you have them start in order to change things for themselves?
I would tell them to take a step back and to really spend some time identifying what it is they like and don't like about what they're currently doing. And then spend some effort and time thinking about how to enhance the things that do bring you joy and make you happy, and then ways to minimize the negatives, or the things that don't bring you happiness. Like I said, there's phases for everything. No one's going to be happy doing an hour of cardio and eating nothing every day, getting ready for a show at extremely low body fat. This is not going to happen. But like we talked about at the beginning, if backing off on the intensity of the sessions ever so slightly makes you feel that much better outside of the gym, and allows you to operate better as a husband and a father and a friend, that makes a lot of sense to me,
For
especially
sure.
considering the fact that that one's going to be sustainable year over year over year, and you're not going to get to the point where it's like, okay, well, I'm fucking over this, I never want to look at a weight again, and chicken can go kill itself. It's very much so a balancing game, and I would just encourage anyone out there that like, whether you feel like you're getting burnt out or not, to just truly have the mindset of, there is nothing that you have to do. There are a million ways to skin a cat within hypertrophy, muscle building, bodybuilding, whatever you want to call it. There's a million ways to do it. Are some ways going to be better than others? Yes, absolutely. But not if those ways are making you miserable. I always joke around with Joe Bennett, because so many people ask us about arm programming, right? And he has the same answer for whenever people ask him that question. And he goes, "Whatever is sustainable doesn't hurt your elbows and is fun for you." Because,
Yep.
over time, if you're banging yourself up on exercises that you think you should be doing, but your elbows get destroyed and you can't train at all for, 2 weeks out of every 8 weeks, that's not going to give you as much progress as being able to train good through those 8 weeks and not being in pain and hurting on your other days and this and that. So, that can carry over. That's in like a example, but that can carry over to anything: the food, the supplementation, the training, anything.
Yep. Yeah. So, like, I think the biggest way to summarize that is just identify the biggest problems and then start checking them off one by one. It's like I think unless you're at a point where like everything is going wrong, I don't think you need to completely overhaul everything you're doing. I think you just need to go through the checklist and go, cool. Well, my training is really, really like messing me up right now, so I need to adjust that. Then once you adjust that, are you on the path you want now? No. Okay. Well, now let's change training. Now let's change PEDs. Now let's change supplementation. Now let's change sleep. It's like go through that checklist and figure out the things that are causing you the biggest problems to identify what is it that is actually going to help slingshot me forward. Because if like training's fucked up, nutrition's fucked up, PDs are fucked up, but then you want to mess around with your supplement stack, it's like you're probably not going to change anything. You're nothing's going to help you move forward. You're probably still going to be stuck in that same spot. So if you're just trying to change these little things that don't really do a lot while completely negating all these other things, thinking that like, oh, I have to do it this way because Ronnie did it or because Branch did it or whatever, it's like you're probably shooting yourself in the foot. You're probably messing yourself up a little bit here. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much the sum of that mindset shift that I wanted to talk about. There was anything else you wanted to list there as we finish up?
No, man. I think this was good. I think it's something that a lot of people need to hear because it's one of those things that you can hear. Little pencil neck on social media telling you how to get big lats by doing a movement a certain way, but you're like, yeah, okay, you've never been there and done that. You weigh 160 pounds dripping wet.
Right.
Well, it's like I have, been there and done that at every level. I've been the, 160-pound kid who wants to put on 50 pounds of tissue. I've been the top 4 Olympian who is in the weeds with the minutia of everything and everything in between. And I can tell you that the most sustainable way of doing things and the most effective way of doing things is the one that keeps you, locked in a good mindset.
Yep.
It
Completely
really
agree,
is.
man. Completely agree. And I think it's a really good thing for people to hear somebody at your level talk about like, hey, it's okay to relax a little bit. It's okay to pull back and not believe that you have to keep doing the same thing over and over just because it got you to the party. It's like at some point things may need to shift. And it's a big like compliment to you that you have even been able to do that, because like we already listed off a couple of people there, like there's some people that maybe if they had changed their stuff a little bit towards the end, maybe they would have a longer career, maybe they wouldn't have had so many injuries and stuff. Like there's the other argument too that maybe it wouldn't have, but if more people started to shift that mentality towards, well, maybe there's a way that I can do this a little bit safer and more efficiently, that they'd be able to extend their career for a long period of time. So I definitely think it's good for people to
And
hear
be
that.
happy while doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we
But
only have one go around at this. There's not really much sense to be made in spending 20 years of it miserable for plastic trophies.
right, to spend 20 years of it miserable and then be done with it and then still be miserable.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing is people forget there's going to come a point where you don't get to do this anymore, and you need
There
to.
is life after bodybuilding, no matter
Exactly.
how good you are at it, for
Exactly.
sure.
Exactly. There comes a point where every bodybuilder, no matter how good they are, is no longer as good as they used to be, and you got to start to shift things a little bit. But I appreciate you taking your some time out of your day, man, and just chatting with me a little bit. And I'm excited for this weekend, bro.
Absolutely, man. It was a nice little warm up for this weekend. Looking forward to getting all y'all in town.
Yes, sir. Me too. Hang around for just a second when we end this. But thanks for
Okay.
everybody stopping by. Be sure to share, subscribe, join the channel. I think I already said subscribe, but yeah, y'all got it. See you next time.